my 4th year as president of the St. Andrews Society of Jacksonville. Those of you who were here this morning when we opened up got to hear me talk just a little bit about the society. A couple of you I've met out there at the table, and I've talked to you a little bit about it. I would encourage you all to stop off at the table and learn about the society if you haven't already done so. But for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you about the history around some common bagpipe tunes. Now, most people who are not pipers know the names of 2 bagpipe tunes. They know Amazing Grace and that other one. And so today I'm going to give you the names of about 5 bagpipe tunes, assuming we have time for all of them. And I'm going to give you a little bit about the history behind them, to hopefully that make them a little bit memorable for you, so that the next time you're out and you hear a pipe band, you can go up and say, I would like to hear, and they'll probably be able to accommodate you. So the first tune, and I will tell you, I am a piper. I'm not a particularly good piper, but I am a piper. But trying to play each and every one of those tunes myself, I'd all be belling up the bag and wasting a lot of time. So I have some volunteers from the Jacksonville Pipes and Drums who are going to be demonstrating about 4 of these tunes for me. And the first one, you don't often hear bagpipe bands play. I happen to like the tune, especially if it's played a little bit upscale. And this one, the reason you don't hear it much is because it's usually the first tune that a piper learns to play. And it's called Scots Wha Hey. Dennis? Scots Wha Hey is sort of the bagpipe equivalent of Mary Had a Little Lamb. So you don't often hear it from pipers. But the reason that I've asked Dennis, he's actually been my teacher for the past 7 years, so getting him to play it is kind of a... And I will tell you that a lot of bagpipe tunes have more than one title associated with them. And they frequently get a title by the most famous lyrics that were assigned to them. A lot of tunes have multiple sets of lyrics, especially when you get somebody comes up with a catchy tune and another poet or another singer comes along with a better set of lyrics, and suddenly the name of the tune changes. So the year is 1313. All right? That's way before MTV came along. And Robert the Bruce has been the Scottish king for 7 years. And he has laid out an edict that everybody has to declare their loyalty for him by a certain time frame. And he's got a problem that Stirling Castle, which is a very strategic location, is occupied by the English. And so he sends his brother, Edward Bruce, and they besiege the castle. And they come to an agreement with the garrison in the castle that unless the castle is reinforced by midsummer of 1314, then they will surrender and march away. And I'm having a little bit of difficulty with this machine here, so hopefully this is going to work to go to the next slide. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. This is an aerial view of Stirling Castle. So, Edward II, who is the King of England at the time, realizes that he cannot let Bruce have this castle and still have any hope of maintaining hold over Scotland. So he raises the largest army in the history of invasions at that time to move up into Scotland and reinforce Stirling Castle. Well, now that faced Robert the Bruce with a problem. He's got to stop that reinforcement of the castle. So, at a place called Bannockburn, these two giant armies, the Scottish army and the English army, meet, and the battle lasts 2 days. During the first day of the battle, actually before the battle even begins, Robert is out scouting the area, and he comes across an English knight named Henry de Bohun. And de Bohun is on a war horse, and he's in armor, and he knows who Robert the Bruce is, so immediately he attacks. Now the Bruce is not on armor. He is not on a war horse. And he is in kind of a sticky situation here because the other guy's got all the advantages. But he's Robert the Bruce, and he's not exactly a shy, retiring individual. So as they pass each other, Bruce twitches aside and avoids the spear, and as they pass, Bruce turns in his saddle, swings an axe, and cuts right through de Bohun's helmet, kills him instantly. The battle lasts 2 days, and at the end of it, it is a complete rout. The English are defeated. The 20,000 people that they took in, less than 2,000 get back to England. So the reason I'm telling all of this is before the battle actually began, Robert the Bruce addressed his troops, gave them sort of a pep talk, a speech. We don't know what he said. Nobody wrote it down at the time. But in the 1800s, Robert Burns, Scottish poet, here we go. Robert Burns sat down and he imagined what Robert the Bruce would have said before the Battle of Bannockburn. And this is what he came up with. Now remember that tune that Dennis played for us a few minutes ago? It's actually older than Robert Burns. He actually made sort of a nursery rhyme type tune that Robert picked up for his poetry. Scots wha hae wi Wallace bled, Scots when Bruce has often led. Welcome to your gory bed or to victory. Now's the day and now's the hour. See the front of battle hour. See approach proud Edward's power. Chains and slavery. Wha will be a traitor knave? Wha can fill a coward's grave? Wha so base as be a slave? Let him turn and flee. So now you know the history behind Scots wha hae. And the next time you hear that tune, you'll know where it came from. And I'm going to give up on this machine because it's not cooperating with me. The second tune, you are going to have to listen to me put up because I ask around and nobody plays it but me. This is called the Pibroch of Donald Dhu, and it is not a pibroch, but they call it that. And it is technically a 6/8 march, but hard to know where to start the story. So this happens about 100 years after the Battle of Bannockburn. It's in the 1400s. And you've got a gentleman by the name of John of Islay. He was the Earl of Ross and Lord of the Isles. And at this time, the Scottish king and the English king, there was a third guy in the mix. He was called the Lord of the Isles, and he was almost a king in his own right. And John was the guy. He was also the chief of Clan MacDonald, or Clan Donald as they call it. And John did not get along with the Scottish king, James II. He really did not like each other. And the reasons behind it have to do with a bad marriage and, a few other things that went on in his life. But suffice it to say, he was not one of James's best friends. So he has this secret conversation with the English king, and he has this treaty signed that says that he will rebel against the Scottish king, and the English will support him. And when they overthrow the Scottish king, then he will get half of Scotland, and the English king will nominate somebody to take over the other half. Great. So John sends his son Angus out to start this rebellion up, and of course the English don't support him. And they quickly decide, hey, this has all been a mistake, sorry about that, I'll go back home and play nice. And the Scottish king, James, because he has other things that are going on, he says, okay, no harm, no foul, we'll leave it alone this time, just be good from here on. Well, this is during the Wars of the Roses, and the Lancastrians and the Yorkists are having some back and forth, and they're both trying to get Scotland to come in the mix in the English internal conflict. And the English king is also afraid that a war with France is coming up. So he wants to neutralize Scotland altogether. So he leaks this treaty that MacDonald had signed. Well, now this gets everybody angry. It gets the Scottish king angry, who strips him of his title. It gets John of Islay's son, Angus, angry because this is a betrayal. And so he actually banishes his own father, makes him live under a boat on the beach. And in 1490, Angus himself, who has been serving as the chief of Clan Donald, is killed by his harper, a man from Ireland. We don't exactly know why that happened. But at the time, he had a very young son. His name was Donald Dhu, which means the black. He had black hair. And Donald, in the middle of this rebellion by Angus, had been captured. And he was captured by the Earl of Argyll, a man by the name of Campbell. And for the next 10 years or so, he was kept as a captive. He was still a very small child, but for about 10 years, he was kept a captive until, for reasons of Argyll's own, also politically motivated, he arranged to let Donald escape. And he made it back home to the MacDonald lands, and of course, this started a new uprising, which was exactly what Argyll had in mind. And he was out for about 5 years in this Donald Dhu's rebellion, and then he was captured again. And he spent the next 37 years of his life as a prisoner of the Duke of Argyll. I'm sorry, Earl of Argyll at the time. At the end of his life, he got out again, and he was actually in negotiations with the Scottish king to restore the lordship of the islands. But he died in Ireland before that could happen. So he lived to be about 54 years old, and of that, about 47 years of his life was in captivity. And that's where the Pibroch of Donald Dhu. Sprightly little tune for a sad story, right? The third tune that we want to talk about who's going to do Skyboat Song for me? Walt? Now the Skyboat Song, who watches Outlander? The opening sequence, the opening theme song is the Skyboat Song, but with different lyrics. Go forward another couple of hundred years, and it is now 1745. And Bonnie Prince Charlie has come to Scotland to restore the Scottish monarchy in Scotland. And it doesn't go well because Bonnie Prince Charlie is basically a twit. He's not, he is one of those folks who believes in the divine right of kings, and because he is descended from kings, obviously he's the best person for the job, and he doesn't listen to advice very well, and he makes some stupid blunders in his military campaign. And at a place called Culloden, he ends up losing everything. There, 1746, the Battle of Culloden. I'm sorry, and at the end of this disastrous battle, Charlie is in a sad pickle. He cannot be captured by the English because they'll do away with him. So he makes this very roundabout escape through the Highlands of Scotland. He's constantly in disguise. He's constantly moving from one place to other over the course of the night. And he ends up, the story goes, escaping with the help of Flora MacDonald, who dresses him in women's clothes and calls him her maid, Betty Burke. No relation. And this is Flora, and that's Charles. And I don't know, would you believe this to be a woman? Anyway, so the idea is they escape on a boat to the Isle of Skye and get away from the British, or get away from the English. Now, the thing about this, and I do need this particular picture. The lyrics that go along with this, the most common version of this, are speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry, carry the lad that's born to be king, over the sea to Skye. Though the waves leap, soft shall ye sleep, ocean's a royal bed, rocks on the deep, Flora will keep watch o'er your weary head. That's a delightful little tune. You've got the young lad, being taken care of by the nanny Flora. Well, it's not the way that happened, because at the time this occurred, Charlie was 25 years old. He's not going to be resting his head in Flora's lap. And also, It's not likely, because if you're escaping the mainland, that's how you get in the sky. You don't need a particularly speedy boat to cross that distance. In fact, what happened is they weren't escaping from the mainland. This is, come on, where is,
Up a bit.
up a bit, there,
Up a bit.
up a bit, there.
There you go.
Here is Skye. They were actually over here on the Isle of Wight, and they were coming back to the west to get away from the English. So they actually did have to cross, but it's not escaping the mainland to Skye, it's the other way around. So now we've got the there we go. At Skye, they're actually over here and they were coming back this way. All right. Who's up for Lord Lovett's? Yeah, come on. We're going to talk about Lord Lovett's Lament. And this is a guy by the name of Simon Fraser, the 11th Lord Lovat. Always waiting on drummers. Ready? And a halt. 1, 2. He's the 11th Lord Lovat. Now, the thing about the Frasers is they have a habit of naming people Simon. There's a Simon Fraser University that was named after Simon Fraser. And there's a Simon Fraser who was also Lord Lovat, who was one of the leaders of the invasions of D-Day. But we're talking about this guy. And he was called the Fox. He was a kind of a tricky guy. And the Frasers apparently have some respect for the 11th Lord Lovat, but he's a hard guy for me to look up to, and I'll tell you why. When the 9th Lord Lovett, his uncle, was dying. He transferred the lordship to Simon's father, who was also called Simon. It gets confusing. And then in turn, the title passed to number 11 here. Well, in order to shore up his claim to the chiefship of the clan, he decided that he was going to marry the daughter of number 9, the 9th Lord Lovett. Well, one of his political rivals had an alternative plan in mind. He wanted this young lady to marry somebody else. And so Simon kidnaps the guy, holds him in a cell with a window. And outside the window, he starts building a gallows. And he keeps building the gallows day after day until the man finally says, no way, I'm not going to marry her. You know, you can have her. Well, that didn't solve the problem because his rival was still out there and he was still... So Simon says, well, if he can't have the daughter, he'll marry the widow of number 9. So he kidnaps the widow and forcibly marries her and takes her to a church. And of course, that outrages everybody. He had dealings in the 1715 uprising. He was on the side of the English. And on the 1745 uprising, he was a Jacobite. He sort of swapped sides as, you know, he saw fit. And after the Battle of Culloden, he was captured. He was an old man by then. He was gouty. He couldn't run very fast, and he was being taken by carriage when the English caught up with him. And they trotted him off to London. And he was the last person to be beheaded at the Tower of London. And he, even up on the day of his execution, he was sort of an interesting sort of mood. Executions were very public in those days. They had these stages, these like bleachers that were constructed to have people have a place to sit and watch. And one of the bleachers collapsed and several people were injured, which caused him to laugh. He thought that was hilarious. So Simon, not really a guy that I have a whole lot of admiration for, but he's the inspiration for Lord Lovett's Lament. Now, I said something about 5 tunes. The fact is, I have now used up all of my allotted time and only 4 tunes. So I'm gonna leave you with that. I would ask that you have, if you have a few minutes, stop off at the St. Andrew's table. We're a little bit honest in what we do. And I'm gonna ask if this has been bothering me for about, I don't know, maybe 3 years. I don't know the name of this tune. And if anybody can tell me what the name of this tune is, I would be grateful.
It's a classic.
No, that's Pete Rock. Never mind, folks. I can't remember the name of the tune. Thank you for your